Welcome with a new heart-touching story. Presented by Storytelling and Beyond. Let's enjoy the story. The night was cruel. It pressed against her like an unrelenting weight, each gust of wind slicing through her thin coat like a knife. The streets were empty, save for the occasional flickering street lamp casting long, eerie shadows on the cracked pavement. She clutched her baby closer, pressing his tiny body against her chest, trying to shield him from the biting cold. He was all she had now. The warmth of his small frame was the only thing anchoring her, the only thing keeping her from collapsing right there on the sidewalk. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she walked, each step dragging with exhaustion. She hadn't eaten since the night before. Her stomach gnawed at her insides, but the hunger was nothing compared to the suffocating fear curling around her chest. Would they help her? Would they even open the door? Tears burned at the edges of her eyes, but she blinked them away. She had cried too much already, through the nights spent in a cold, empty apartment, through the long, lonely days filled with nothing but silence and a growing sense of despair. She had once believed in a different future. A warm home. A loving husband. A child growing up surrounded by laughter, by safety. Instead, she had been left with nothing but this endless walk through the dark, searching for scraps of kindness wherever she could find them. Up ahead, houses lined the street, their windows glowing with a warmth that was almost painful to look at. Behind those walls, families were gathered around dinner tables. The smell of food drifted faintly in the air, baked bread, something rich and warm simmering on a stove. A reminder of what she had lost. Her fingers dug into the baby's blanket as she passed a house with sheer curtains. Through the fabric, she glimpsed a man lifting a giggling toddler into the air, spinning her around as she squealed with joy. The sight cut into her like a blade. That should have been her life. She squeezed her eyes shut, pushing forward. Thinking about the past wouldn't change her reality. And right now, reality was standing in front of a small, weathered house at the end of the street, the house where a stranger had offered a free stroller. It wasn't much. But it was something. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she slowed her steps, staring at the front door. This was it. She took a deep, shuddering breath. What if they said no? What if they looked at her, this desperate, hollowed-out woman with hollowed-out eyes, and turned her away? What if she had walked all this way, clinging to a sliver of hope, only to have it ripped away? Her breath hitched. I can't handle another rejection. She thought of the landlord's voice, cold and final as he told her she had to be out by the end of the week. She thought of the empty fridge, the single can of formula she had stretched as long as she could. She thought of the way people averted their eyes when she asked for help, as if her suffering was contagious. Her fingers trembled as she reached up, hesitant, terrified. And then, with every ounce of courage she had left. Knock. Knock. The sound echoed in the silence. She held her breath. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The baby stirred in her arms, letting out a soft, tired whimper. No response. Maybe no one was home. Her heart sank. She took a small step back, debating whether she should leave, when suddenly the door creaked open. A figure stood in the dim light, shadowed but present. For the first time in what felt like forever. She wasn't alone anymore. The warm glow from inside the house spilled out onto the porch, washing over her like a wave of something foreign comfort. Safety. Things she had not felt in so long that she almost didn't recognize them. The figure in the doorway was a woman, her silhouette framed against the inviting light. She was older, perhaps in her 60s, with kind yet cautious eyes that scanned the shivering mother before flickering down to the baby nestled in her arms. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The young mother could feel her own heartbeat in her throat, thick and heavy with fear. What would this woman see? A beggar? A burden? A mistake? She opened her mouth to speak, to explain, to justify why she was standing there on that doorstep with nothing but desperation in her arms. But before she could utter a single word. Come inside, the woman said softly. It was just 2 words, but they shattered something inside her. Her knees nearly buckled. She stepped forward, the warmth of the house wrapping around her the moment she crossed the threshold. It was almost suffocating after so many nights spent in the cold, and for a brief second, she felt dizzy. The baby stirred, his tiny face peeking out from the bundle of blankets. His little lips smacked together in that innocent way newborns do, oblivious to the weight of the world on their mother's shoulders. The woman closed the door behind them, sealing out the cold. "Sit," she said gently, nodding toward a couch. The young mother hesitated for just a second before obeying, sinking into the cushions as her legs finally gave out beneath her. The house smelled of cinnamon and something warm, maybe soup? It reminded her of childhood, of coming home from school on winter afternoons to the smell of her own mother's cooking. Back when life was simple. Back when life was safe. She swallowed hard. Those days were long gone. The older woman sat down across from her, eyes scanning the young mother's face with quiet concern. "Are you hungry?" she asked. The question nearly broke her. She should have said no. She should have said she was fine, that she only came for the stroller and would be on her way soon. But instead, her lips trembled. Her throat clenched. And before she could stop herself, she nodded. A single tear slipped down her cheek. The older woman didn't say anything. She simply stood, walked to the kitchen, and returned moments later with a steaming bowl of soup. The young mother stared at it, her hands shaking as she reached for the spoon. The moment the warm broth touched her tongue, something inside her unraveled. She had been starving. In more ways than one. The baby cooed softly in her arms, and for the first time in what felt like forever. She wasn't afraid of tomorrow. The spoon trembled slightly in her grasp as she lifted it to her lips again, the warmth spreading through her chest, not just from the soup, but from something deeper. Something unfamiliar. She hadn't tasted a home-cooked meal in what felt like forever. Each sip felt like a memory she had lost. The scent of spices reminded her of nights in her grandmother's kitchen, watching the old woman hum as she stirred a pot of soup just like this. She used to believe that warmth like this would always be there, that home would always exist. But then life had stripped her bare, one heartbreak, one loss, one cruel turn of fate at a time. Now, sitting in a stranger's home with her baby in her arms, she felt something foreign stirring inside her. Was it relief? Was it fear? Or was it simply the breaking of the wall she had built around herself? Across from her, the older woman sat silently, watching. She had not asked a single question, not about where she had come from, not about why she was here, not about what had led her to knock on this door in the dead of night. And that, more than anything, made the young mother feel exposed. Because kindness without expectation was something she no longer understood. The baby stirred in her arms, his tiny fingers grasping at the air. She instinctively cradled him closer, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead. His warmth against her skin was the only thing that had kept her going, the only thing that had kept her from vanishing into the darkness entirely. "What's his name?" The woman's voice was gentle, almost hesitant, as if afraid to intrude on the fragile moment. She hesitated. For months, every time someone had asked about her baby, it had been followed by judgment, questions she couldn't bear to answer. "Where is the father? What happened to you? How did you end up like this?" But here, in this quiet living room, the question felt different. Softer. She swallowed hard. "Oliver." Her voice came out in a whisper, as if saying his name aloud made him more real. The woman smiled. "That's a strong name." The young mother let out a shaky breath. Strong. She needed him to be strong. She needed to be strong for him. But for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel weak. And before she could stop it, a single tear slipped down her cheek. The older woman saw. And she did not turn away. She did not rush to ask why she was crying. She did not smother her with questions or force her to explain. She simply reached for the baby's tiny hand, her fingers brushing against his soft skin with a gentleness that made something inside the young mother break completely. This woman didn't know her. She didn't know her story. But in that moment, she saw her. And somehow, that was. The weight of exhaustion pressed down on her, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't drowning beneath it. She had been running for so long. Not just physically, though the long, cold walks, the restless nights in shelter lines, and the aimless wandering through unfamiliar streets had left her body hollowed out. No, she had been running in a much deeper way. Running from the past. From memories too painful to hold. From the fear that if she ever stopped, if she ever allowed herself to feel, she might shatter completely. And yet, here she was. Sitting at a stranger's table. A bowl of soup settling in her stomach. A baby asleep in her arms. And silence that, for once, didn't feel like an enemy. She glanced around the small but cozy living room, taking in the details. The mismatched furniture. The books stacked unevenly on the coffee table. A faded photograph on the wall, two smiling children, their faces frozen in time. There was history here. A life lived. A home. Something deep inside her ached at the sight. It had been so long since she had belonged anywhere. The woman who had taken her in sat across the room, knitting with slow, practiced movements. The rhythmic click of the needles was the only sound in the quiet space. She hadn't pressed her for answers. Hadn't demanded explanations. And yet, the unspoken question hung between them. Why are you here? She wished she had an answer that didn't feel so broken. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket wrapped around her baby. She had knocked on that door tonight expecting nothing more than an old stroller, just something to help her keep moving, to make the next step of survival a little easier. But instead, she had found this. A warm meal. A chair to rest in. A moment where the fear didn't feel so suffocating. And suddenly, it felt unbearable. She couldn't stay. It was too much. Too unfamiliar. Too kind. Every time she had trusted, she had been let down. Every time she had hoped, she had lost. And right now, as safe as this moment felt, she knew better than to believe it would last. Slowly, carefully, she shifted in her seat, adjusting Oliver in her arms. He stirred but didn't wake. The woman looked up, eyes sharp despite her gentle demeanor. Leaving? She hesitated. How had she known? Her fingers curled tighter around the fabric of the baby's blanket. I should go. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it felt like a scream inside her chest. She waited for the woman to try to stop her. To tell her she couldn't. Instead, the woman just nodded, setting her knitting aside. The door's open when you need it. Her breath hitched. No one had ever said that to her before. Doors had always slammed shut. Or been locked before she even had a chance to knock. She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly against the sting in her eyes. She wasn't sure what to say, how to respond to kindness that didn't come with strings attached. Finally, she just nodded, shifting Oliver in her arms as she stood. And yet, as she took her first step toward the door, something in her chest cracked. She had spent so long running. Could she really keep going? Or for the first time in forever, could she stop? She stood at the doorway, frozen. The night stretched out before her, cold, dark, and uncertain. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the familiar bite of loneliness. It was a world she knew too well, one that had never been kind. She had survived it before. She could survive it again. And yet, behind her, the warmth of the house lingered. The scent of soup still clung to the air. The soft glow of a lamp cast long shadows on the walls. The woman sat back down, picking up her knitting again, as if nothing had happened, as if she wasn't about to walk out that door and disappear. As if she wasn't just another lost soul passing through. Oliver shifted in her arms, a tiny whimper escaping his lips. His fingers curled into the fabric of her coat, clinging to her as if he, too, knew what was at stake. She had knocked on this door expecting nothing. And she had been given a choice. For the first time in so long, someone had left the door open. A lump formed in her throat. How many times had she begged for this? A chance. A place. A person who didn't turn away. Her whole life, she had been told she wasn't enough. Not strong enough. Not worthy enough. Not good enough to be loved. But maybe, just maybe, she had been believing the wrong voices. Her fingers tightened around Oliver as she took a slow, shaky breath. She turned. The woman glanced up, her expression unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, something knowing. Something patient. "You can stay the night," she said softly. "No expectations. No pressure. Just rest." It was such a simple offer. And yet, it unraveled everything inside her. Her legs trembled as she stepped back inside, the weight of her decision pressing down and lifting at the same time. The door closed behind her with a quiet click, sealing out the cold, the fear, the past. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't running. For the first time in a long time, she had somewhere to go. At Storytelling and Beyond, we bring you powerful stories that touch the heart and remind us of the strength of the human spirit. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that matter. See you in the next one.